are coming. So let me begin by talking about one fact in my life you need to know. I babysat a lot from the age 12 on, all the way through college. I babysat all the time. I always considered myself an expressive storyteller because whoever was in my charge, any of the children in those families were captured by what I said. So I always assumed I was a good storyteller when I read picture books at night, getting the kids to take their naps. I always thought I did really well until I took a class my junior year in college. So as an English education major, we had 2 speech requirements. Everyone else only had 1 speech class they had to take. We had a second speech class, and I realized I was running out of time. It was my junior year. Senior year was like student teaching and the senior paper, and would I be able to find another required speech class that would fit in the schedule? So a whole group of us, math education students, English education, science education, we all got lumped into this class called Oral Interpretation of Literature. As many syllables as possible, right? I didn't know what it was about. I now know that on many college campuses, if you have a speech and debate team, a college team, that's actually a category of competition, oral interpretation of literature. It's like dramatic monologues where poetry or passages, well-known passages from plays are memorized and performed for points on a speech and debate team. So I didn't know anything about that walking into this class. All I knew was it fit my schedule, and I recognized a lot of faces. Even math education majors were taking oral interpretation of literature. So we walk into class that first day, maybe there were 20 of us, and Professor Lewandowski was a drama professor, and I knew his face and I knew his name on campus, and he proceeded to hand us all copies of Matthew Arnold's Dover Beach. He put 3 or 4 of us at the front of the room and said, you read this many lines, you read this many lines, you read this many lines, I want to see where you're at. We didn't know what was going on at all. We were completely oblivious. He went down the row, we each read lines, and he just nodded his head and looked at us gravely. We didn't know what we did right or wrong, and he had us sit down. He proceeded to go through all 20 students doing the same thing, just listening to us. Then he went through us a second time. We read the exact same lines, and then he opened his mouth. He began to tell us what we said wrong, what we spoke too quickly on, which words we mispronounced, and said, you have no appreciation for the word that you are saying. The purpose of my class is to bring awareness to your words. You're going to be teachers. All of your words matter. And he gave us a rousing speech and terrified us equally. So after 2 weeks in that course, I was very pleased with my C. I thought I was an expressive person. I thought I was a good storyteller based on the crowd of children I'd babysat for so many years. And I didn't really realize, it took me a long time in that class for things to click so I understood what Professor Liu wanted from us. And part of that, yes, it was an awareness, but he went through precisely whenever we performed in class, and I really do call him a performance. It was a performance. He was a drama professor. However, we had a folder in front of us, just a black folder. We could tape our passage or poem, our Bible verses, whatever we were reading that particular week. We were allowed to put notes on it so we remembered which words were most emphasized, or be sure this alliterative phrase you read a little more slowly. There were so many hints and tricks that he gave to us. But then we'd also hand him a copy. So after we did our presentation, he would hand us back a copy with all of his notes, and usually it was everything you did wrong. So I grew to expect the negative in that class after about 2 months, and then I finally made a B on one presentation. I was so happy. I was so happy I had a B finally. I'm improving, but I felt like I couldn't get any better. So I finally had the guts to stay after. He was a very dramatic person. He sort of had a charismatic type A leader, a little overpowering kind of demeanor, so intimidating for a lot of students, frankly. I stayed after because I had performed a poem by Christina Rossetti, and I thought I really understood it. I felt I didn't read it too fast. I felt that my words had flowed. I felt that I knew the cadence. I felt I was being eloquent. I felt it had gone really well, and it still had only garnered a B. So I was disappointed in myself. I'm like, I just want 1 A- in this class, 1 A on one assignment, please. So I stayed after and talked to him. He did have time, and he worked with me on 2 lines of a poem. And by the time he finished talking to me for 10 minutes, I thought I probably had an understanding of where he was going. And a lot of it was process. It was practice. And he did tell me, he finally complimented me and said, Christine, you are improving. And I was like, okay, that's good. That's good. I can't remember what I made at the end of that class. It wasn't about the A at all. It was just like, what is this beast, this expression thing that I don't understand that I thought I understood? And he helped me to slow down and to see and to understand what it was I was unaware of. So when we read aloud with students, as teachers, as we are showing expression, we know that we are modeling to our students, and at the exact same time, we know that our students need help reading expressively. I see a lot of nodding heads because you know the students who intuitively are able to read aloud expressively. When it's time to read a passage from a story, and maybe you have a few students, you just pick across the room. Some students naturally are just better readers on the spot, not having read something ahead of time. They're just on the spot. Their voice is just naturally more lyrical, and it sounds like just a soothing tone. And you know it's likely been modeled at home and by other good teachers before you, and they naturally pick up on those, but not every student does. And I will readily admit, not every teacher. We might think we're an expressive reader, but is there a way to help us become more aware and know what to do to make ourselves aware of that for our classes and then for us as we're in front of the class every day? So on your handout, if you have one, look on and share. Maybe a few extras got passed around the room. I think we're good. It looks like we're good. We know that reading aloud can bring beauty to us and to our students. Spoken words bring life to the written word on a page. And because words reach our classes through our voice and our students' voices, it's that disciplined voice and the disciplined ear that are vital to good reading in every subject, just across the board. I'm a literature teacher, and I teach primarily in the humanities and integrated humanities classes. But if I'm reading Bible, if I am reading a history book, am I just going to go to monotone because those aren't my favorites or something? No, not at all. It's all reading across all subjects. The thing with reading expressively is that it involves repetition, just like it does for our students, and it involves a slower pace. It requires all of us to take more time. So, interestingly enough, Aristotle spoke about this. I have to put in an Aristotle plug because he talks about when we first reach knowledge of something, there's something about our senses that's involved. He writes, the first knowledge we have of any one thing is the delight we take in our senses when we encounter the thing. That is, an artifact, an idea, a text. Before we ever analyze the thing, we first recognize that we are aware in some rudimentary way that a desire is being satisfied. That is the use of one or more of our senses. This is how we know that mankind, distinct from the animals, desires to know. This kind of knowledge is prerequisite to higher experiences of learning, such as judgment and reason, metaphysical things, I'm sure he's mentioning. But it's that exposure to the senses is that first entrance to how we are gaining the knowledge. And when we are reading aloud, when we're communicating orally, and our students are with us, especially if we're requiring of them to read and participate in telling story and reading passages, it's equally important that we are helping them become aware of their senses. And the most important thing, of course, is to slow down. It's that slower pace so that we can actually hear and embrace what it is that we're doing. So on your handout, this is going to become a very interactive exercise quickly. You can still find today, there are a few schools that still teach oral interpretation of literature. Proud to tell you there's a few textbooks out there that you can read a lot about what to do and how to perform pieces. Those texts are almost always about earning more points and how you perform and what a judge will say to you. But in this exercise, I pulled from a text that had 5 exercises that we can practice. And we're going to begin with number 1, which is breath. Number 1 is breath. So to do this well, I need everybody to stand. I need everyone to stand. So we know this when we've had students present individually and they get really nervous or anxious in front of us. How many of us have ever told our students, breathe, just breathe, it's okay. Take a breath before you start, before you present whatever it is you've required of them. And it's that breath that's one of the most important things to let go of and to breathe deeply and to know. So this is going to be fun. We have to use a little bit of our physiology. So would you, with your 10 fingers, place them on your abdomen where your rib cage is, just right on your rib cage. And you can read along. I wrote out everything so you can use it in class if you ever want to and just do it as a group for fun one day. We know that our posture has to be good. So usually when you put your hands on your rib cage, all of a sudden everybody's shoulders just went right back. Did you notice that? You notice if you stick your elbows back, your shoulders go back. So now your diaphragm has all the space for breathing. So the first practice is, and I'm just going to read straight off the sheet you have in front of you. You take a deep, comfortable breath and hold it. And place your hands on your abdomen, contract those muscles, and force the air out by saying ah, as if you are sighing. So we're just going to go ah. Okay, one more time. Ah. And when you say even just a word like ah, you can feel it going out, and you should feel a little bit of an extension at that lower part of your lungs. Okay, so now let's take a word. How about the word sweet? We're just going to use a 1-syllable word, and you can practice with your students. You can pick any word of something they're trying to memorize and have them also see if they can tell that their lungs are filling out a little differently. So we're going to take the word sweet, we're going to take in a big breath, and we're going to breathe out the word sweet, like we're sighing the word. Does that make sense? All right, here we go. Take it in. Sweet. Sounds a little creepy, right? Because we're putting a lot of breath into it because we're drawing awareness to our lungs and filling them. If you're taking big breaths, your body relaxes. If you're really nervous, you're only breathing in a tiny part of your lungs. And that's something that we can be aware of to help our students. All right, you can sit down. Thank you. Thank you for being good guinea pigs. So if I have students performing and maybe I have 3 or 4 presenting something that day, we will as a class do a breathing exercise. You can do jumping jacks and you can all just go, and, do big inhales and exhales. That works too. But sometimes just feeling it for yourself and knowing that, oh, look at that. My lungs actually felt like they were more full for a moment. It helps relax you. Your shoulders, that tension hopefully goes back just a little bit, so they can, in front of a class, actually do a little bit better with their expression. All right, the second one, number 2, I combine volume and projection because it is about how we are speaking. Some students are naturally loud, and we always try to tone them down so they're aware. Other students are naturally quiet, and we're constantly going, more, just a little bit more. So volume is the degree of loudness. Projection directs the voice. And this, when we are reading expressively, is about the sense of your audience around you. You've probably heard similar things about always speak to the back of the room so that everyone can hear, and that's projection. But here's a few more examples. When you are trying to concretely explain to students about which kind of voice you want them to use, these might help. And I just went ahead and wrote them out for you. So if you wanted to give them a contrast to show the difference, you might say, if you're out on the playground and you're trying to get a friend's attention, and there's a lot of background noise going on, a lot of chatter, what kind of voice do you use to yell Jack's name? It's not like, Jack, hey, hey. No, it's Jack, right? That's projection. Those kind of everyday examples usually really help students, help things click so they know what you're talking about. Speaking to a large group then, in contrast to an individual who's right next to you, who's asking you a question, is also a good example to use with students. If you are sitting next to a student and your desks are together and you just turn and ask them a question, well, you're using the appropriate volume, we hope. The teacher's already called you out on it. Hopefully you're using the appropriate volume. But if I'm trying to get the attention of the entire class, my projection and my volume change based on the situation. So when you give examples of everyday, this is just how we use our voices already. We already many times socially do know how to use the right volume and how to use the right projection, or we're training our students in that when they're much younger. Using those everyday examples helps them know when they're in front of a class, this is the kind of voice that you use. If I talked normally right now in my normal conversation tone, it'd probably be just a little bit too quiet for a few people at the edge of the room. But I already know I'm talking to the back row, and we as teachers speak all the time. So we're used to projecting, but we don't really think about it. We're already aware of it. The goal is to help our students become aware of it. And practicing does help that. I gave a few more examples there, but let's move on to number 3, because this is the one that bothers most teachers, and it's something I work on with my quiet students, and that is the pitch and the quality of the voice. Pitch of a sound is its place on a musical scale. Usually we call it high, medium, or low. As you interpret literature, or whatever you may be reading, your pitch suggests shades of meaning. Change in pitch gives variety and contrast to the material being read, and it helps hold the audience's attention. Because the change of pitch gives us inflection, this is actually how it works, a speaker's inflection range is the entire pitch span between the highest and the lowest tones. That's how it works. Any pattern in pitch results in melody. So monotone is when there is no discernible changes in pitch. And you can have too much inflection, and you can have too much melody. If someone doesn't quite know what they sound like, sometimes you just record them for a second on a phone or any other device that you have, and you can show that. But if I have a student say, I'm not good at reading aloud, however they come up with that judgment in their mind, I can never read aloud, Mrs. Norvell. I'm not good at this. I don't want to read aloud. And many times when I ask, why would you say that? Why would you say that? We're all going to try in this class. I have a monotone voice. And I'm like, I dare you to try. Read the next sentence. Try to keep it all the same tone. If I try to pick a sentence from something I just read, if you have a student who says to you, I cannot read aloud, I can't read aloud good enough, I'm not expressive like so-and-so is, and they're comparing themselves to other students, how do you help them? That's usually when I say, just read a sentence monotone for me. It has to be all the same. Can you do it? Pitch of a sound is its place on a musical scale. You have to be robotic. It has to be weird. And if they try it, then they're like, I can't do that. And I'm like, that's because God built natural inflection. And our voices go up and down constantly without us even thinking. I want you to be more aware of it when we read a story together. That's all. Just don't sound like a robot. We'll keep working on it. So we're going to practice this with just 6 lines of a poem. Just the first 6 of The Wild Honeysuckle by Philip Freneau. So I'd like you to work with a partner. This is what I would do in class. Match yourself with one other person, maybe 2. You can do groups of 2 or 3. Did the poem not go through the second page?
I didn't have it on mine.
Oh no! The backside didn't get copied? Oh, some people have it and some people don't. Okay. Oh, nice. This works. Let's try it. This will work.
Maybe. Do you have a copy of it?
Yeah, right there, right at the top. Thank you.
Maybe?
Yes. Excellent.
So it's just this top part?
Just that little section. That would mean some of you have, you don't have the back side, you don't have number 3, 4, and 5? Oh.
We don't have colorful color and timbre.
Okay.
I'll go make copies of the second page.
That's my copy.
Does anybody have this?
I don't think I have. Thanks so much. All right. So we need partners, groups of 2 and 3. And this is what you're going to practice. We're just going to practice our pitch and our quality. So read it quietly first to yourself. You can make marks on your paper if you'd like to. Which words would you emphasize? Fair flower that doth so comely grow. It's a lovely line. How would you choose to say it? Think about it, read it silently. Be aware of your own inflection. And where does your voice naturally go up or down? And that's what you're going to work with your partner. So do it more than once. Read it out loud to your partner. And then read it a second time and see if you can improve upon it, which is something I always do with my students. If I have them read one stanza, just 4 lines of a poem, I'm always like, okay, now do it one more time and see if you can improve upon it. What would you say differently? Especially if it's something new to them that they haven't read before. All right, so let's take just a few minutes. Copies are being made. You can see the 6 lines. Does everyone have a partner group? 2 or 3? Groups of 2 or 3? Just read aloud to each other. So, yeah, we have copies. Yay. Raise your hand if you need a copy of this back side of the... Is that... Okay.
I don't think the original.
I made 15, but maybe I need to.
Oh, it just didn't... Oh, okay.
Where did my original go? I didn't realize we had that.
I didn't either. I'm so sorry.
I read it quietly in my head.
It's time to read. Read out loud to your partner.
I read it a second time because I might change things. Oh, I read. Okay. Ready? Here we go. Fair flower that dost so come through. Hid in the silent untouched thy honeyed blossoms, unseen thy little branches wreathed. No roving foot shall brush thee
On that side.
no busy for a foe. Alright. Thank you so much. So now we read it again. Right? And this time, see if you change it.
Okay, last time. Who's ever turned, you're on.
Here we go.
Last time.
No roving foot shall crush thee here. No busy hand in this heart.
I like how you put emphasis on foot and You were like, foot. Oh, dirty. Yeah, that's it. Okay, ready?
It sounded very much like the rendition that would be played. Yes. Would you read it?
Untouched, thy honeyed blossoms blow, unseen, thy little branches. No rude foot shall crush thee, no busy hand provoke thee.
Okay.
All right.
Let's come back together and compare a few notes. So I'm going to say something that hopefully will not be offensive. When we read aloud and you're reading a story in class, whatever level of students that you have, and you take turns and go around the room and you each read a portion, or you do a popcorn style and you just call on names and just make sure everyone's attentive so they're following the story and then they know it's their time to read, that actually I think might do a disservice to the students because they've never read the words before. And if you expect them to be able to read aloud well without preparation, we might be skipping a step. I have noticed when I give my students time, maybe 10 minutes, to read something we're about to read aloud, usually something obviously of a shorter nature, not an entire chapter of a story. When I give them time to read something silently, and then we take turns reading aloud, there's such a huge difference and improvement because they've been exposed to the words at least once, and the fast readers will have read it a couple of times, and those who need more time at least don't feel caught off guard, especially with words that they don't know. So hopefully that's not offensive, because it's one of those things where I'm like, oh, we need to take more time to do this, and all of us as teachers feel the pressure to get through the curriculum, or I need to finish this novel, or we need to finish this poetry study, or whatever subject we're working on, and if I have to take more time to do this, that takes more time out of my class and my week. But it's a step that I think is actually really fruitful. So I notice, especially with my high school students, for years I did popcorn style reading when we read plays and I assigned parts, or we were reading a couple chapters of, say, The Scarlet Letter in class to sort of lighten their at-home reading at night. That many times when we were reading aloud, so many students weren't listening to what they read because they were so focused on saying the words right or pronouncing things or trying to do better or at least as equal to the student that sat next to them. And then they're not listening. They're not. The favorite days were, Mrs. Norvell, would you read us a story? Every age wants to be read to. It takes the pressure off of them because then they can focus on listening and appreciating the beauty of what you're saying, because you, the experienced one, is doing the work for them so that they can hear. That's just an interesting way to look at when I'm trying to read things and cover material in class, how do I do it? So I'm asking if it helps, if it works for you, if it helps your students feel more comfortable reading aloud, give them a little extra time to read silently to themselves before they have to read in class. Now, assigning it the night before isn't always successful, I found, with at least older students, 7th through 12th grade. As many times they're like, oh, we're just going to read it aloud, so I don't have to read this now. It's like, ugh. So I do class time. I read this poem quietly right now. Take 5 minutes. You're welcome to mark it or just read it. Then I'm going to call on a few of you to each read a stanza. It comes out so much differently than if I just have them do it cold. Does that make sense? It's sort of a unique thing to take time that way. So you can also do this. Poems are really easy to use because of their brevity typically, but you can also do this with passages when you want to draw attention to the beauty of something that you're reading. So number 4, everyone has a number 4 now on the back side, yay! I'm so glad. Word color or timbre. I used to always say that word timbre, and I got corrected a few years ago. It's timbre. How about that? Now you sound so officious. All right. So this actually goes really hand in glove to Dr. Rapinchuk and Sarah Osborne's workshop that was literally in this room the previous hour, because we're talking about the delight of words and using words. So maybe timbre is a new one for all of us. All right, timbre is one way to describe the quality of the tone, often the resonance of the voice that we hear. It's not pitch. It's not the volume of the voice. Timbre is often described with words that suggest color or money, because it's a difficult thing to define. So I wondered if maybe you've heard things like someone's voice has a golden tone, a silver-voiced speaker, or from The Great Gatsby, a voice full of money. Daisy had a voice full of money. I'm always like, oh, that's fascinating. How can your voice sound like it's full of money? It's the timbre of the voice. It's one of these things that's difficult to define. I'm not sure if we're aware of how we define it for ourselves or for our students. It's just one of those fascinating terms that's used to describe voices that sing and voices that speak. So words we know carry the meaning, while vowels and consonants carry sounds, and some combinations of sounds can slow the pace of our reading as others give a sharpness or a liquid effect. So many of you, when you read fair flower that doth so comely grow, there is something to lines like that. That's the liquid effect. They're smooth. They've been so precisely crafted by Fresneau in this case that maybe, hopefully, in your second reading or hearing someone else with a different mind who's experiencing the poem in a different way may have said it differently. So let's talk about what you did with your partners. Did any of you notice something different in your second time? And if you noticed it in your second time, could you tell me what it is? Did you notice what you did differently? Or after hearing your partner read it, did you notice how you said something differently? Anyone?
So like on the no roving foot shall crush thee here, I did realize like I said it more, especially like the shall crush thee here, shall crush thee. So like more of a
Yeah. Absolutely. That's good. Anybody else? You noticed you said it differently the second time because you heard yourself or your partner emphasize something differently. Did you notice that? Kevin?
I felt something, the first time I read it not really thinking about perception, others' perception of me.
Yes.
The second time I read it, I think in my mind, I had worked myself up to the idea that I was going to have to read it differently, and I think I overthought it and probably said things not in any way I would have said them the first time.
But that's the fun of playing with words.
Right.
And if I asked you to read it 5 times, could you read it 5 times the same way? Do you think you could? No. Could our students? No. No, but this is one of those fascinating little tidbits from this college class I took so long ago, is that Professor Lewandowski would walk us through lines and say, how would you mark this? Create your own marking system. As a teacher, before I read a poem aloud to a class, I actually, personally, just because I was trained to, in a sense, I will sit and make a few marks. I'll put a little line under my alliteration, and then I might play with it at home and say to myself, fair flower, fair flower, fair flower. Why not? Can we teach our students to follow that? Can I just walk around the room while my students are all working on maybe just one line? What if I blocked this all off and had my class just do fair flower that does so comely grow? Fair flower that does so comely grow. Where can I put the emphasis? Where is it natural? And many times, especially in poetry and also in Bible verses, you know almost instinctively which words are the most important. So, on those last 2 lines, no roving foot shall crush thee here, no busy hand provoke a tear. Students, even in high school, will say tear, but then they'll go back after they've read it once. Oh, here, tear. It's a tear. It's not a tear. Right? there's hints in the actual poem and in the actual lines that help us if we slow down. What will make it more lovely? How can we draw our attention to those things for our students and for ourselves? It's more awareness. I can mark rhyme and meter on this and talk to my classes about that, but I actually am hesitant to do it. I want them to hear it and to say it. Would you change it? You heard your partner next to you. Would you improve upon it in any way? Why don't you just try it a different way? Now, I've also done the experiment where I've asked my students to make lovely poetry ugly. I don't know what got into me on a particular day, but I thought, can you make this sound bad? Isn't that interesting? But if we talk about playing with words and how words are used, can I make fair flower that does so comely grow ugly? Do you think you can? Well, most students want to shout it. Shouting makes things ugly many times, right? Fair flower that does so comely grow. Make it a question mark. I mean, how do you make something ugly? You have to work at it when it's written well, which is an interesting thought. And many times when you practice things like this, sometimes that, the negative example, the antithesis, often helps you realize this is pretty, let's leave it there. Let's not make it worse, Mrs. Norvell. Yes, I understand. All right, so we're now going to practice with some sentences from two lovely novels. So you should have, under number 4 there, again with your partners, this time rather than lines of poetry. These are simply sentences from novels. You're going to read it quietly to yourself. Do you want to mark anything? Which word should be emphasized? What's important? And then read it through at least 2 times with your partners. And then we'll compare some notes. So let's take 5 minutes. Everyone got right to it. Amy, was there one more copy? And I'll put it up there. Number 4? Oh, sorry. That's right. It's the same page. Sorry. I wasn't even remembering that. You'll have to show me. I've never had one of these lovelies. Other way.
I would have read it as if this was
like that.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't have a partner, so can I ask a question?
Sure.
I'm guilty of reading a play in class, and they haven't read it ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
I love to read to them. I do that all the time with the play. That is a harder thing.
It is. And that's when I usually choose students who I know will do a part well and let volunteers. And if anyone doesn't want to do it and they really don't like to do it, I leave them out. Yeah, because usually it's 3, 4, 5 parts at the most when you read a scene or 2.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I treat that differently.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, go.
Fierce. Her hands are smooth but tough, like newborn frost like frozen.
A nice, fresh, light snow. It's actually over time. Okay. Are we doing both?
Yeah.
Mamoka. Mamoka? Okay, I'm going to go with Mamoka.
It is mamochka.
Oh, Mamochka.
It's like Polish or something. Slavic. Mamochka.
All right. So here we go. Mamochka feels like the forest too, fierce and gentle all at once. Her hands are smooth like new bark.
Remember to try to improve upon it the second time. Try to improve upon it. So you more than once.
What word this is?
It's a word. I think it's a Polish word for grandmother. So think Russian, like mamochka.
Oh, mochka.
Mamochka.
Sounds like a Starbucks coffee.
Yeah, and I think it means grandmother actually. So, okay.
Fierce and gentle. Her hands are smooth.
I like it because it's like, have an easy, like, one of those ones.
Oh man, I have right here between the. Oh, I know. It feels like it has a more.
I really felt my glasses. I did. As if they were brushing against my face. Line glasses.
Okay.
But then you have the dark hair.
The thatch that her hair is also the ridges of mud and the stone roach.
Fierce, gentle. Her hands are smooth. Like newborn. Her hair is dark, like the shadows between pines. And she smells sweet, like wine blossoms.
No, this is a different one, but similar.
This is fun. I'm having a hard time with this piece called Moon Over Manifest.
Mood?
Moon Over Manifest. Claire Vanderpool. There's a lot of southern speech in it, which isn't. It's not hard. I mean, I get it. I can get into the drawl.
Yeah.
My issue is changing characters. And then all of a sudden you realize,
Oops.
like,
Yeah.
this was a different person speaking.
Yeah.
You kind of have to go back to the kids, like, sorry, reverse,
Yeah. I've done the same many times.
Yeah.
Yes.
Having not reread it.
Yeah. Sure.
Like your ages, like first and second grade.
Yes.
Would you ever model reading it to them before you have a baby?
Before you have a
We're about to get to that. Yes. Yes, we are. All right.
Yes.
I want to get to all the examples of other ways you can practice this with your classes. So, in class, if we've been practicing with partners or groups, I always have a few stand up and have them share how they would read it, because not just with your partner, but when the class is still and I have maybe 3 students stand and read the same thing, you'll still hear it 3 different ways, but all 3 ways are expressive. And I do think that helps students feel more comfortable, especially those who feel unsure of themselves or insecure. When they can hear the differences and I, the teacher, am pointing out, look, she used that word that way and he used it this way. Was one better than the other? Most students will go, no, it was still great. It's like, exactly, let's keep practicing. All right, so let's take that first sentence from the God Forgotten about the hoarfrost. Who would like to just share how they said it? Just stand up and read it out. Hoarfrost. It's not long.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hoarfrost lay white over the hard frozen edges of things. The thatch that roofed the hovels, the ridges of mud, and the stone and rubbish in the lane.
Excellent. Thank you. Someone else? Let's hear them all. Come on, let's do 2 more. Who else can just read it? Let's listen to how we hear it differently. Yes.
Hoarfrost lay white over the hard, refrozen edges of things. The thatch that roofed the hovels, the ridges of mud, and the stone and rubbish in the lane.
Well done. Yes. One more. One more. Come on, come on, come on. I like to hear volunteers. I don't want to have to pick on you. Call you by name. I'll just read off your name tag. Okay.
All right, let me get my feet underneath me. All right. Hoarfrost lay white over the hard, refrozen edges of things. The thatch that roofed the hovels, the ridges of mud, and the stone and rubbish in the lane.
Excellent. I once had, this is bringing back memories, Professor Lewandowski worked with us a long time on the WH sound. How do we say who, who's, white? He would make us overpronounce it because he said, I want you to hear it. So even just hearing this right now, I'm like, hoarfrost lay white. White. It's fun to play with the sound though. Do you see what I'm saying? We want to bring that delight. We don't want to be so rigid with our students to hear those words. So can I take time to read a whole paragraph with a class this way? Likely not. But tell me this. In your classes right now, do you read any novel that you consider beautifully written? Can you raise your hand? Do you read novels that you feel are beautifully written? Yes. So how can we help them? Other than knowing the experience of something that they read, that they enjoy the whole book, can we slow it down and pull back and just take a sentence? Pull a sentence to read with them and take a 10-minute time, a space of time to draw attention to that, to slow that down. All right. So lastly, although, did anyone want to read Mamochka? I think it's a Polish name for grandmother, it's Slavic. Did anyone read The Girl Who Speaks Bear that came out last year? It's beautifully written. I read and reviewed it for a website last year, and it's based on a folk tale, but it is about a girl who becomes a bear and then becomes a girl again. So she has to learn to speak bear, but it's delightful in its descriptions of the animals who speak and the nature setting and just how she refers to all the people she begins to forget. When she becomes a bear, she forgets who she was as a girl kind of thing. And this is one of those lines when she's talking about her grandmother, and she still, as she's turning into a bear, recalls her grandmother this way. It's just very lyrical writing for 10-year-olds, which is amazing. I love that. All right, the last thing that Professor Lou would talk to you about is vocal quality. And that's the overall picture of all these things we are putting together. Connotation, emotional response, natural melody, empathy. All of those affect how we read or don't read aloud. Being aware of all these elements can bring forth the emotion, strength, and beauty inherent in the material. I will say one of my cautions is if I know a student's going through something tough at home, even for the space of weeks or months or whatever it may be, many times I won't choose to call on them because sometimes you'll hit a passage or something that you're covering in class and the emotion is there, or the fact that they need to shut down to protect themselves and they can't read something. They just can't. We have to be aware of those as teachers, of course. But if their emotions are being stretched and strained, their empathy is too, and that will come out in the voice. And those are things that we are careful of. So, as a teacher, I urge you to choose pieces that are naturally and simply beautiful. Parallel structure passages, the opening of Tale of Two Cities, anything that's descriptive, things like Fresneau's poem, The Wild Honeysuckle. Poems, Bible verses many times are delightful, and you're able to bring out the beauty that's in them by slowing things down. So, here we come to the nitty-gritty. How else can I do this in class other than what we've just gone through? Hopefully you have the third page. Yay! Okay. So, imitation is wonderful for us as teachers because we can do this in the car and we can do it at home. When you listen to a book on Audible or maybe Hoopla, whatever your choice is, LibriVox, sometimes I find a really good narrator who has an accent from another country that I enjoy, and I will listen to something for fun. Tell me you've done this. Hopefully it's not just me, but I hear a British narrator for, say, Pride and Prejudice, and then in the car, when no one's listening to me except myself, I will try to imitate said British voice and try to say the same thing in a lovely way because it just comes out delightfully. And then I just want to play with the words myself. Anyone ever? No, probably not. But, okay. Anything that's just fun to say. Sometimes I'll joke with my students whenever we study the Italian poet Petrarch, and we talk about his unrequited love for Beatrice. I'm like, you all, It's Italian. Her name has to be Beatrice. You know that. You know. But you play with language and words because it's just part of the fun of what we do, right? So imitation comes first for us because who are we imitating? Have you thought about who you imitate? I had some really grand teachers, I have to confess, that were dramatic and fun and expressive, and I think really helped me improve how I speak to my students. But here's a few other examples here. Listen to a few lines from an audiobook narrator by yourself for practice, or have the class listen to a couple of sentences and see what they do with it. What if they imitate someone who's not even in the room and is not you? What could they do with that? So ask the class if they can improve upon how the narrator spoke. Someone else, a total stranger, someone that's very neutral for them. Could you do it? Try it a few times. Take time to play with that. So that's one thing that has helped me sometimes, especially when I'm reading Shakespeare, and I'm like, I still don't have the lilt of the line of the whatever famous soliloquy from Hamlet. I need to hear it again, and I will go listen to something or listen to Mel Gibson deliver the lines from that Hamlet version from the 80s, 90s, I'm not sure. But anyway, I will listen to something because I want to grasp it so that I can deliver it well with my classes. So it comes to me as the teacher to improve how I'm reading expressively. The next one is preparation time, and this is what I've been mentioning the entire workshop. Choose a passage that is easily divided or a longer poem with multiple short stanzas, and you can give each student a stanza. Long narrations or historical narrative poems work well that way. The lines are short. It's not a lot. Everyone can have 4 lines, and you spread it out. You, the teacher, model the first stanza, and I've done this many times for years, and you read through it twice, seeing if you can improve upon it the second time. I've done this specifically with the poem Ode on a Grecian Urn when I'm doing ancient Rome and Greek in 9th grade. I will have that huge long poem and divide the class and say, this is, each of you are going to do a stanza. And I will say, just read your stanza silently, take 5 minutes, mark anything you want to, and then we're going to all do it together. But each of us will read each stanza twice. It takes more time. But I'll read the first stanza aloud and then say, okay, let me read it again. You all see if you can notice if I've improved upon it in any way. Have I said it differently, more lyrically? And I will read it out loud for them and model that and see if I can do differently. And sometimes I do well. And sometimes they're like, nah, the first time was better. I'm like, okay, same for you. You're next. You try it. You stand up. You read the second stanza. Read that out loud. All right, now slow down. Let's see if you can do it a little louder. I'll give a few coaching points. Everyone knows they're going to go through those coaching points like Professor Aloud did to me, but hopefully I'm a little more loving or more kind in tone, something. And we'll go around the room, and we will take at least 30 to 40 minutes to read Ode on a Grecian Urn. That's my 9th grade class. My 12th graders in American Lit, we've done, we usually do poetry sections for a while, and it's not just American poets. So we've often used Christina Rossetti's Goblin Market. Huge long narrative, pages of the story. It's a whole fairy tale. It's way more stanzas than I have students for because it's not. I don't think it's even in stanzas. It's all one long poem. So I'll separate it out and assign students, and they have to have read it before we actually present it as class as the entire story, and then we'll just take turns and do that as well. And that it works. It works because we're slowing down and listening to ourselves. All right, the last one is choral reading, and that is matching 1 to 2 students with a teacher or an expressive reader. So I will not pretend that every student is on the same wavelength as you are with your level of expressive reading. And obviously, every student won't be on the same level in a given class, but that's where you match up students who have a stronger reading voice naturally, or yourself, and you do group work, and I will put myself with 2 readers that need more help. And I can literally coach them as we read it, and it's not in front of everybody, and it's a really simple way to encourage them in their reading voice before we come together and do something that way. And I've had great success with matching 1 to 2 students with other strong readers in class. When we divide the class that way, literally only 10 minutes of work, how that can improve and help them. So I realize that when we talk about literacy and fluency and maybe how all those interesting tests give us numbers about how students do, it doesn't reflect. They don't have this wonderful, amazing metric that reflects the beauty of what we read. There's no way to measure that. How can you measure if a student can read well out loud and is capturing the beauty of the words, or if you are? There's really not. But it's one of those things that the delight is there easily. When we choose beautiful things, I think the delight naturally comes, and we're simply ushering in and leading our students to see those same things. As we work on it ourselves and we model our ability to improve, they can do the same thing, I think, and we can bring them along. All right, questions. We have just 1 minute. 1 minute left. Thank you for being very willing to practice with strangers, most of you, to say poems and lines from novels. Yes?
What do you do if you've got the student who's overexpressive, like the one who is, I mean, they're not ugly when they read it, but it's just everything is dramatic.
Yes, that they become my partner. You know, many times though, I find that students are not aware of what they sound like.
Yes.
They really are not. And their ears are not hearing themselves the same way you hear them. And sometimes that just takes a little extra work.
Maybe like recording them and like.
Yeah, recording is really easy. You can do it really fast right then. Any other quick questions? Yes?
When do you recommend a child to start reading to themselves, like just with reading it out loud? What age?
What age to read out loud at home or?
Stop reading out loud to themselves.
Inside their head.
Yeah, just in their head. It's not out loud early. You're just curious.
Okay, say that one more time. That was a whole paragraph.
Early readers that read out loud.
Yes.
Right? So when do you recommend them not to do that anymore?
Oh, that's interesting. I have no training in the early years.
Mine, I teach second graders, and mine are transitioning into that.
Yeah.
I have readers who are still whispering to themselves, and
Yeah.
I have some that are reading silently. And by the end of the year, my hope would be that they are all moving
Toward it.
And so that's
I have a second grader, and he is like, all right, see if you can, he's a good reader.
Yeah.
Let's see if you can read to yourself. Because I can't do that. So
Yeah.
I would move
I
to
just wasn't sure.
whispering.
I wasn't sure
And
when
then,
if
yeah.
I should. But he's also the kid that emphasizes when he shouldn't. So I'm
Yes.
thinking I'm going to hold off a little bit on that so that he can learn to read better.
I just know from our own boys that it took at least a year for that to sort of just.
I'm curious.
It naturally happens.
Yeah, between my kids.
Okay.
Well, and you know, one thing is there are two types of people. There are some people that when you are looking at it and you're reading it in your head, you see a picture, you're not actually reading the words. And then
Oh,
there's some
yes.
people that's not what you see. You're actually reading the words, and the words are just kind of thrown in, and the words are being projected into your brain. And so for the people that are that second one, it's very easy for them to read silently, but very hard to read out loud because they're conflicting between their brain and their mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones that are the first way, it's very difficult for them to be able to read. They're very slow readers when they have to read quietly.
Right.
So you have to also take that into account of what they see when they're reading.
That's true. That's true. Thank you, everyone. I know we're supposed to be over there at 11:30. Back at the hook. You're welcome.